Fantastic content. We had a great conversation at our table about 8 million things that we feel are going to change and how to do that. And thankfully, Jason and Rick have solved everything, so it's perfect. I'm super excited to invite our next speaker. And I told her this morning, and so it's not like a secret. But when I was a youth pastor, I will honestly tell you there was one person that I looked at that I was like, oh, I wish I could be like them. They were my weakness in the comparison trap. And to the point where I actually had to stop following her youth group on Instagram because I was like, I can't keep up and I can't do it, so I have to unfollow. And it was one of the healthiest things I ever did. Just because it was too much. She did such a great job, and having gotten to know Laura over the last couple of years a little bit, I'm so thankful for her and for what she's done in youth ministry, in kids ministry, but also within our district, and so thankful that they're not living in the States anymore. Like that, stop that, and just come home. That's way better, and we're happy to have her back home and also have her here sharing with us today. So, Laura, why don't you come and give it up for Laura?
My husband's the technical one, so. Hi guys, how are you? Good, do you need to just stand for a sec? 30 seconds, ready? Shake it out, yeah, there we go. I think we're at 10 seconds. There are babies everywhere, and it's the best distraction. How old is this baby? 7 weeks, oh my goodness. Oh. That's awesome. Oh. Who needs youth ministry when you have youth pastors, right? Well, my name's Laura, and I'm actually so nervous right now, and I was trying to figure out why my body's reacting this way, and this is the biggest group I've been in a year and a half. Yeah, I'm like, I think that's what's happening in my body. My body's like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm like shaking all crazy. So a little bit of our story is we used to pastor in Ontario, and then we went to America and had a horrible experience. And roots of bitterness. Literally when Jason was talking, I'm like, I'm gonna start crying before I talk. This is not good. I gotta do some work with God in the car ride home. But the church that we were part of was called Influencers Church. And the irony is that a few months ago, when Wayne asked me to prepare something along this topic line, he said, how to move beyond being an influencer to actually impacting students for Jesus. And I could not stop laughing because I was like, do you know where I last worked? It was literally called Influencers Church. And I'm like, oh, I can preach that. No. I have content, let me tell you. So this is not a jab at my old community, but the roots are there, so maybe it is. And I'm no longer in vocational ministry, but my neighbors were over till 1 a.m., so I feel like I'm still pastoring and really in a cool season of life. I never got the opportunity to go to Bible college. Maybe one day I'll get that opportunity. I was trained as a social worker, and it's just how it works for me. So today's chat is going to feel probably more social worker-esque, just because it's just who I am. And we're going to just kind of go back to the beginning session. And I think repetition, they say, is the essence of learning. So some of stuff will be repeated, but maybe the repetition will help it hit in a way that really just feels like you can grab onto something, right? unless you learn fast, and then I'm sorry. I need repetition. I don't know if you guys are familiar with deconstruction. All of your students are deconstructing something. It's like a difficult word right now, but it basically is this idea from a philosopher that said that we have meaning for terms because meaning was given to the terms, which sounds very philosophical. But that we have to start as a society or as people looking at why things are the way they are, why they have meaning the way that they do, and go from there. So a really quick example of that, because it's a complicated sociological term, is I was living in Africa for a bit, and it was the fall, and I said to the people I was living with, man, I'm missing apple picking in Canada. And they said, what is this thing? And I was like, well, you go and you pick apples. And they're like, tell us more. So I said, yeah, totally, right? And I was like, well, so you go and you pay for like a basket, and then you pick apples, and then you pay for everything you pick. And you take photos, probably, with your kids looking cute, and then I didn't have kids then, and then you leave. And they looked at me, they said, so in Canada, you pay to harvest someone else's field? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And then we pay for what we harvested. And it was like this moment of really, we're from two different worlds, and what we're colliding on is apples being picked, okay? That is basically what deconstruction is, okay? It's looking at the facts, which is in both of those scenarios, whether I'm harvesting the field or paying to harvest someone's field, apples are being picked, right? But depending on the lens in which you are living in the world, experience the world, your education, your family, your culture, whatever it is, how that has meaning changes, right? So that person thinks I'm getting screwed. And I think this is the best thing I could do with my Saturday afternoon, right? So deconstruction, I think as pastors, when a kid's like, I'm deconstructing, we're like, don't do it. But the reality is that there is some areas, and I am like, I will confess that I get sheepish about what Wayne was saying about Instagram, in the sense that when I was youth pastoring, 10 years ago I started, Instagram, like I'm so old that Instagram didn't exist, and then it did, like I am pre-Instagram life, pre-Facebook, pre-internet, like that old. So there are some things that we have as a culture that the fact is apples are being picked, but if we don't look at it, we actually are getting screwed, or we're screwing up. Okay? And why I get sheepish about that season of my life is I was a youth pastor and Instagram was just starting, and I think, although really human, that my motive was quite pure for engaging in it, right? My first post ever was packing the truck with donations for our missions trip, right? It was a way of engaging with students, and then we had a Twitter, and we bought followers. I literally bought followers. So it was like, you buy, I don't know, followers. So we paid for people to follow it because that's what you did, right? It was all evolving at this time. So it's like, how does this church in Barrie have 25,002 followers? It's like, we only have 2, and we paid for 25,000. And it cost like $6, and someone stole my identity overseas. Like, it's just what we did, right? And at that point, it felt like picking apples. It felt like I didn't feel like I was getting screwed. I didn't feel like I was screwing anyone up. And yet now, when I look back at it, I see that I was actively part of putting our youth ministry, and I think youth ministries in general, we're struggling with this too, on a trajectory that honestly, right now, it makes me like physically get really upset because if we're not careful, we've just made it very shallow. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So Did I give signs? I'm a mom. Or slides. Signs? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So I may read some definitions if that's okay, because I don't have them memorized. But influence and influencer are language that have very different meanings. What's hard though, and this is where deconstruction can be a really good thing to do, just the act of like being chronically suspicious of why that, what does it mean, and if it means that, how does that change things for us? So to be an influencer, and you probably know this, but it's simply someone who has the influence over others' buying decisions, okay? In other words, it's someone who has influence, the authority, or the trust of a certain group of people. In marketing, an influencer is someone who causes other people to make specific consumer decisions. So that's that Insta mom that has that soother, and that's why everyone has the soother. Those are the only people I follow. I don't know what other influencers are out there. What other things do people influence people to buy? I only follow moms. Is there treats? Did you say treats? Oh, shoes. Yeah. I'm like, actually, I do follow local restaurants, and I do follow them. Treats. Yeah. Okay, so like products, shoes, anything that you could consume. Say that again? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, eternal posture in heaven, hopefully. Yeah. So that's an influencer, okay? Now, influence, which is just one letter difference, is this: the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of something, someone else, or just the effect itself. So, as a Christian, or just in this room, this could be a very irritating conversation, because you're like, influencer, influence. Why are we getting so hung up on semantics? And it's because that changes things so slightly, but if you've done any math, even if you failed it, you know that changing the angle just by 1% lends you ending somewhere very different than maybe where you initially intended to go, right? So when we're a Christian, we hear the word influence and we're like, I want to be an influence. It actually feels like a Christian term, right? And it's a Christian idea, like Matthew 5, you're the salt of the earth. That sounds like, you want to be salty. That's influencing people, right? You're the light of the world, a city on the hill that cannot be hidden. Don't put yourself under a basket if you're a lamp. Peter 2:12, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you, they'll see your good deeds and glorify God. So it's like, so wait, I am supposed to have influence or be an influence, but why does that also feel really sticky and icky, especially when you're then part of a church called influencers? No, okay. That was my bitterness seeping. Our Timothy 4:12, 1 Timothy, let no one despise you for your youth, but set believers an example in speech, right? So we live in this world between influence and influencer. As a Christian, we really identify with one, but as ministry heads, we're teetering into the world of both, right? So when you look up, if you Google, which I did, how to be an influencer, to prepare for this, it says Forbes' number one thing that you need to be a successful influencer is a niche, right? Hence the moms. I swear these women are having 30 babies just to sell products. That's not a judgment. It's their niche. It's like, I make babies and people buy products. Like, this is my niche, right? And the shoe people, they probably have, that's their niche. It's shoes. The slippery slope between influence and influencer and Christian influence and Christian influencer is that at some point Christ becomes the niche for the product we're trying to sell, which even in the best well-meaning positions like me as a youth pastor was the program. Come, because I have a niche, it's Jesus, to Bible study, and we have fries. Right? But when I read and I go through it, it honestly makes me pretty upset, because we diluted him to this niche to fill a program because we had board members asking, if I was always part-time, but if you're a full-time pastor, you have to have so many kids in because you have to justify your thing. So then you're marketing. How many of you are like, I never took a course in Bible college about marketing and I'm literally a YouTube star? Right? Like, you're like this. Someone at my table is like, the hustle of YouTube, you do not want to be a YouTube star. I'm like, I do not. But Christ can't be the niche. So there's a Rolling Stones article, Australia Rolling Stones, from 2020, November, that I found about, and so this is basically like a content analysis by Rolling Stones of Christian influencers. So what they're doing is they're looking at influencers online, and people are studying this because it's a phenomenon, right? So it'd be like, let's look at these moms. Did they really have 13 children? Yes. Oh, that's interesting. So they were studying Christian influencers, and this is the article. It's a half page. I'm going to read it, but it's riveting. Okay. So, quote, sharing daily style inspiration to their 150,000 followers on Instagram under the moniker Twice Blessed, the Melbourne-based twin sisters, now both going by their married names, list themselves as ambassadors for Jesus Christ on their profile. Influence, right? Amongst the sleek posed outfit posts and warmly filtered still life photos of various gifted products are acknowledgments of the source of all their good fortune, God. Quote, 2020 is a crazy year so far, and it may get crazier, says the caption under a recent image of a pair of $1,800 Roger Vivier ankle boots shot in a Parisian apartment during the Paris Fashion Week. Quote, but we're filled with peace because we know that he is fighting our battles. For where there is instability and uncertainty, he is stable and always true. It's a photo of boots in a Parisian apartment at Paris Fashion Week. It keeps going. It's a potent theme for Twice Blessed. The combination, so this is a secular person studying this, okay? The combination of cool girl style and the idea that success that they enjoy is a personal blessing directly from God. Quote, God definitely gave us a mandate that he's allowing us to make him cool, says Shotra. Quote, for us, I know. For us, Jesus is always cool. But I think for the population and the general consensus, people see church or God as not cool. Quote, I remember God telling me specifically, interjects the sister, your ministry is going to be your work. We're living examples of who Christ is in our workplace. Yes, influence. See how we're going between influence and influencer, right? Doing it so organically and in a way that is natural to us makes Christianity look more realistic, more attainable, and more normal. Which I don't know about you, but when I read about a man who laid his life down on a cross for the sins of the world, I don't think attainable, realistic, or normal. Right? What are we marketing to people? To make him cool. Why? Normal is a word that Twice Blessed uses a lot in the interview, and something of a common motif that appears in all of my interviews, this is the writer, with Christians and Christian influencers. It's tempting to balk at the idea of two self-processed ambassadors of Jesus and 150,000 followers strong influencers who are gifted endless designer products as normal. But the thing is, it kind of is normal to them. That their life revolves around capturing picture-perfect Parisian images of a pair of designer boots that cost more than my first car. So it's complicated. And my tone sounds really judgmental of these. The root of bitterness. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a long car ride. I'm like, oh, there it is again. But I think that what it is, it's a visceral cringe that all of us have. And maybe the cringe is so visceral because it's us. Right? It is us. It's like even in the people in my life, it's like, yeah, I go between wanting to have influence to being an influencer, even though I'm not on the social media platforms in that way. You're trying to sell something because we are part of, I'm going to deep dive social psychology, but when you're in capitalism and you're struggling with self-worth, well, what our society has done is said that how you prove your worthiness is you become human capital. So a lot of it for all of us is about productivity and actually selling ourselves to the general population so that they buy us. It's such shallow relationship, but it's part of how we all function, right? And so not being productive feels amoral. Anyway, so you can, and that's why deconstruction is really good with some of this stuff, because we need to go down those really uncomfortable rabbit holes of what does this mean and how does this actually impact life and ministry and the kids and family and the future if we don't question these things, right? So as ministry leaders, especially working with young people, we see this even with them, especially because of their lack of maturity, but they're full on in this culture, is that they want you as their pastor to be an influencer, right? They want to have someone to follow. I think it goes back to, why did the Israelites want a king when they had God? Why did they want an idol when they had the mountain had fire and Moses said there was fire and we're all saved and every frog, you saw frogs everywhere. Why do you need a cow? Have you ever thought, like, it's part of our human nature. We want to, I call it the Lucifer effect. We want to worship or be able to see something that we can worship or have it be us that gets the affection, right? It's part of pride, our sinful nature, all of it. This is what we struggle with. And then when you have a crowd of people around you, it becomes complicated when you're a ministry lead. So how does this impact organizational stuff? When should I shut up? Soon? Is 12 our lunch? 12:30. Oh. Some people were just like, no, tell her 12. There's a 30-minute difference between those times. Math. Okay, so this obviously impacts us personally, but I think what's hard is when you're an organization, which the church is the church, but it's also an organization, right? It's also a business. You can deconstruct that. Tell me what you come up with. But there is an organization. You have boards, you have budgets, you have a job description, you have to prove that you're doing something. So then it becomes, there is this slippery slide into marketing, but it is about Jesus. But then you know it's complicated, right? So organizational pressures, I came up with 3, but I think there's a ton. The first is that when you kind of start adopting an influencer type marketing strategy and you aren't aware that Christ has become the niche. So I'll back up and say, do I think that churches can market their programs without Christ being the niche? Yes. How? Carefully. With awareness. You have to be aware or you're going to do it because it's what we're being taught to do, right? Do I think that social media is and obviously online is an amazing platform to get the message out there, to start relationships, all this stuff? 100%. We just want to be the people who are aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and who is getting worshiped at the end of it, right? And I don't know about you, but my ego is very human. And so if people like me for no reason, just other than they think they should, I love that. Who wouldn't, right? Like, you think I'm awesome. I remember being in youth ministry and wanting to do a series called You're Not Awesome. And I was told that would be too hard on young, growing self-esteems. But you know that everything is awesome? That was during that time. Everything is cool. And I was like, nothing's awesome. It's hard to be awesome. You actually suck. And I had all these kids that are like, I am awesome. I'm like, it's a whole lifetime to be awesome. And you are, you know. But we want to be awesome. I want to be awesome, right? But if you're my kid or my husband, you would know I'm not. And I have areas that are so immature and bitter and need lots of growth and healing and all of these things, right? So yeah, we just have to be careful of who's being worshiped. What happens if it's not me? Do I become uncomfortable with that? Where am I getting my affirmation from, right? Is there a cheap way to get it? Yes. Do you have to sell your soul to do it? Probably. Do you have to sell other things? Yeah, maybe. But asking those questions with ourselves, right? And with our marketing team or our ministry, if I don't know if people have marketing teams, but it sounds legit. Nowadays, people probably do because online is such a big thing, right? But we're dabbling with things that could take us into harvesting someone's field and paying for it versus, the way that I'm sure my friend thinks that's crazy, right? And yet I enjoyed it because I believe it's, until someone said that to me, I was like, this is picking apples the best way it could be done, right? So 3 organizational things that I think can happen is that the first is that people become attracted to your brand and they start identifying with your brand, and it never actually translates to a relationship with Jesus, right? So we'd have kids that would buy the youth group sweater. Oh my gosh, we had merch was like, I'm like, we're making bracelets, we're making shirts, we're making sweaters. We had dog tags. We had everything but shoes. We had shoelaces. Literally, we were like merch. We had kids that would buy every ounce of merch, wear it in their schools, rep the brand. But when it came to actually speaking into like, do you know that Jesus loves you? Like, do you want to serve him? Do you want to follow him? Do you know that there's some stuff in your life that he gave us an instruction manual of how our bodies were meant to be used in a way that wouldn't be harmful to us, how relationships are supposed to happen that wouldn't be harmful to us. Do you want that instruction manual? No, but I'll wear everything that you sell, right? And I'll come to that conference and I'll be at the front and I'll be doing all the things. So brand identity can, for you and your youth pastor, can make you feel like, oh, look, they're not embarrassed. They are an influence in their high school, but they are not. We created an influencer who was selling merch, which was great because it paid for the missions trip. But still, it's the shallow alternative that looks good, but it really does not have substance, right? So brand loyalty doesn't often transfer to community commitment or the struggle of discipleship, right? So that's 1. 2 is consumerism. So young people searching for meaning, adventure, excitement actually take on the role of the consumer, not the disciple. Their expectations then are entertainment, and the pressure on the leader, you, is to keep them chronically entertained. Oh, right? So the first session this morning about like content. There was a pastor in our town that was doing Bible study 3 times a day. And online prayer 3 times a day. And I was like, I am so stressed just thinking about having to attend that, letting alone like preparing that, right? So I used this example before, but if I go into a Walmart, the role that I'm playing changes the expectations I have of my experience there. Right now, I just don't want to die, right? But prior to COVID, my role would be, I'm going in as a consumer. So I'm going to walk in and I'm going to find a cart and I'm going to grab a cart, and then maybe I have a list, or maybe I'm just being whimsical. And so then I'm going to go through and pick things that I want, and I go through, and if I'm on aisle 4 and something has fallen on the ground, if I feel like I want to help, I'll kick it to the side, I just get it out of the way. And maybe I see something like there's something in aisle 4, and I continue my morning, and then I go to the thing, and unless I'm doing my own self-checkout, which we need to deconstruct that. I am now working here. So I normally, if I'm there in person, I want someone else to bag my food. I just feel like this is part of the experience, right? So I put it on, they bag it, I do put it in my cart, and then I now do delivery. Can you tell? I have a lot of hang-ups with grocery shopping. I used to work in group homes, and I would get paid to grocery shop. So when I transitioned to life where I didn't get paid anymore, I was like, I hate this. I hate being here. So then I will take my groceries, and then I go home, right? the whole experience is about me. And maybe in a moment of like, oh, there's something on the floor, I would stoop to help. But I would not take on the responsibility of that. I'm not thinking later, I hope aisle 4 got cleaned up because there was a mess in it. I've gone on with my day in my life, right? Another role is someone who comes in as a staffer, right? So before they've even gotten there, they put on their uniform, right? They walk in, they don't go grab a cart and start shopping. If there's a cart there, they put it away. If they're going through the halls, it's to look for things on aisle 4. Right? When they see it, even if it's been kicked over, if they're good staff, they pick it up. They clean it. They do their thing. They are then the one at the till, checking me out, putting stuff in the bag. Their expectation of their experience there and my expectation of the experience there is all about the roles that we have, because the roles that we come into that institution with change the thing that we play out, right? So when we are influencers as a ministry or market in that way, what we do is we get consumers. So when they walk into church, they literally are like, where's the cart? I'm whimsically wandering here today. I don't want to bag my own stuff, right? And that's why it's hard. How do you get a volunteer team if everyone's a consumer? No one's going to pick that thing up. No one, right? And this is why we're like, why can't we get a decent person? And it's like, well, we've sold this to them. Come to this. Oh, I got in it hot. Is this being recorded? I don't care. So, the global senior pastor of Influencers Church, I was nursing my little one, which is when I'm on Instagram. Now I have no social media time, so I can't hide in the bathroom for hours. But breastfeeding was great because you just hide from your other child in a room with the other one who's too little to need anything except just you, Mom. And Instagram's like, you should follow this church. And it was another campus plant of these campuses. And the funny thing is they want to plant so many campuses, but they keep closing campuses. But then they keep promoting, we've planted another one. You're like, but you closed 2. But we planted another one. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I look at this new one, and it's the last post says, we can't wait to welcome you on Sunday we can't wait to welcome you on Sunday so that you can experience a 5-star worship experience. See you then. And I was like petty and tired, and I screenshot it, and I blocked out everything, and I just posted very petty, bitter. Jason's like, this woman needs help. Name me Mara, right? Is that the bitterness? And I was like, can someone explain to me 5-star worship experience, right? Well, this global senior pastor went at me. Let me tell you, there was some offline chats that were happening. This is from the Bible. David wanted a 5-star worship experience for God. That's why he built the temple. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even go to Bible college. Don't you know God didn't want the temple? He literally said, do you think I need this? Like, I don't want this, David. I mean, if you really want it, I can let your son do it. But like, he literally said, I don't need this. Do you think I need this? I don't want this. This is not what worship looks like to me, right? And so we went into this whole thing. But the problem is that when you are promoting on your Instagram posts, come for your 5-star worship experience, which I know is a very overt example, but it's literally happening in churches all over the place. You set people up. If I'm going to church for a 5-star worship experience, what do you think I'm thinking is going to happen? Am I going to serve or be uncomfortable? No. Am I going to talk to someone who smells? No. If I'm offended, am I going to complain and go to the consumer board and say, your pastor sucks, I want someone that can communicate? Probably, right? We set people up for this because we want them to come in. And I do believe that at the heart of it, a lot of us want people to meet Jesus, but what did she say? Making Christianity look realistic, attainable, and normal. Right? So consumerism. The third is idolatry, and this is, I think, what happens when the leader or a leader becomes the face of the organization, right? And I mean, So many of us struggle with this because we do want people there, but you can basically tell if that's happening if you go through an Instagram feed and it's the worship pastor or the lead pastor is every photo, right? That's dangerous. And I'm not saying that they did that for their ego. They probably got a lot of, like from analytics, a lot of feedback and a lot of engagement when Pastor Bob is there over and over and over and over again. I hope there's no Pastor Bobs here. I just picked that name. But the problem is we are so frail as humans that when I am sold Bob's quote, Bob's quote, Bob's quote, Bob's quote, when I come and Sally is preaching, I now have idolized Bob and I only want to buy what he has to sell. And I've actually disconnected it totally from the Holy Spirit. And I zone out for Sally because how can God use her? We could deconstruct that too, but you know. So idolatry, we have to keep in mind that we want idols. It's part of our sinful nature. So people want idols. So we've got to go out of our way to mitigate the temptation for idolatry. And social media makes that very complicated, right? And so, I don't actually even know how you post in a safe way, honestly. So actually, I think that's what you guys need to discuss and come up with. But I think what I would say is that a safe place to be is one where you are chronically suspicious of you, your motives, your thoughts, where you're uncomfortable, but you stay in that place when you're like, was that the right thing to do? And you're praying about it. And I know it sounds so trivial to talk about like bringing your social media marketing strategy to your prayer meeting, but wouldn't that be crazy? It was like, so guys, on Tuesday night prayer, we're going to be praying about the church's Instagram. That's what we're praying about. How do we use this? How do we engage with people? Are we TikToking? Let's pray about this, right? And just staying in that chronically suspicious place. So how do we address this? Yeah, I have no answer. It's all questions. Young people are drawn to this because they are searching for meaning, adventure, purpose, and excitement. And in a narcissism-fueled culture, which, really, right? With a very short attention span, the thought of being ministered to by God while developing a following or position is so shiny and attractive, and even well-meaning youth pastors, quite literally myself, are tempted to create novel events or social gatherings to keep them enticed. However, the reality and the rhetorical answer to the question is that as we model our lives after Christ and point them to Him, that's when their lives are actually influenced. You know, the pressure is off you when you realize you cannot save anyone. You never did, and you never will. It's the Holy Spirit. And so if we think, my message has to do something, my ministry, my program, just let that go, literally. Let it go. I used to care about what I wore to things like this, right? This shirt is covered in vomit. It's so old. If you get close, and I'm wearing my husband's deodorant, because at some point you realize nothing I say here, how I present it, what I look like, even what you think about me will matter. None of it. I can't do anything. But if the Holy Spirit grabs a hold of this and actually does something, then you get to actually live life with Him. He'll transform. And it's the same with our kids, right? It's the same with our young people. Don't make Christ the niche, but He is all that matters, right? Don't sell easy, normal, attractive, whatever, but it is the cross. That's not a product. That is definitely not something to sell, but He will transform lives, right? So here's the questions. There's 12. So pick one, or any, or none, or just process. Or go back to the conversation you were having before around bitterness. Actually, for real, our table, we had a moment of silence. Just all of us, corporately agreed to say nothing. And then someone said, I just don't know how honest I should be, right? And I really think over lunch or the rest of whenever you're here, I actually think this room is full of people who are I have been under that tree ready to die and give up. I don't know who to talk to. I would do that this weekend right? And maybe not in the 10-minute thing, because it is hard to get into it, but I know our table alone is just like, do I say it now? Is this a safe place? So I would have that conversation. That's a worthy one. The first is, how has influencers' culture impacted young people in your community? Do you feel organizational pressure to conform to this subculture, mainstream culture? Where are areas that branding, consumerism, and marketing need to be reassessed in your ministry? I know. And 4, what are ways that young people can be encouraged to be an influence and not simply an influencer? So answer all of them, answer none of them, but ruminate. Sounds good? Okay, there we go.